1916 was a crucial time for the women's suffrage movement in the United States. After decades of politely requesting the right to vote, the strategy was pivoting towards a more radical approach. Women began protesting, staging public demonstrations, and engaging in civil disobedience. Influenced by this new energy, Carrie Chapman Catt announced her winning plan, a new, more aggressive strategy for the National Woman Suffrage Association. And in November of 1917, she delivered, in the form of a letter, her open address to Congress, warning the senators and representatives of the United States of the need for action.
Women's suffrage is inevitable. Suffragettes knew it before November 6, 1917, opponents afterwards. 3 distinct causes made it inevitable: the history of our country. Ours is a nation born of revolution, of rebellion against a system of government so securely entrenched in the customs and traditions of human society that in 1776 it seemed impregnable. From the beginning of time, nations have been ruled by kings. From the beginning of time, nations have been ruled by kings and for kings, while the people served and paid the cost. The American revolutionists boldly proclaimed the heresies: taxation without representation is tyranny. Governments derive their powers from the consent of the governed. Our theories made women's suffrage inevitable. 80 years after the Revolution, Abraham Lincoln wheeled, "Ours is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people." 50 years more passed, and the President of the United States, Woodrow Wilson, in a mighty crisis of the nation, proclaimed to the world, "We are fighting for the things which we have always carried nearest our hearts, for democracy, for the right of those who submit to authority to have a voice in their own government." Not one American has arisen to question their logic in 141 years of our national existence. How stupidly our country may have evaded the logical application in times, it has never swerved from its devotion to the theory of democracy. Certain denominations of Protestants, Catholics, Jews, non-landowners, working men, Negroes, Indians were at one time disenfranchised in all, or in part, in our country. Class by class, they have been admitted to the electorate. Meanwhile, the United States opened wide its gates to men of all nations of earth. Meanwhile, the United States opened wide its gates to men of all the nations of the earth. By the combination of naturalization granted the foreigner after a 5 years resident by our national government and the uniform provision of the state constitutions which extend the vote to male citizens, it has been the custom in our country for 3 generations that any male immigrant accepted by the national government is a citizen, automatically becomes a voter in any state in which he chooses to reside, subject only to the minor qualifications prescribed by the state. Justifiable exceptions to the general principle may have entered. Men just emerging from slavery, untrained to think or act for themselves, and in most cases wholly illiterate, were not asked to qualify for voting citizenship. Not even as a measure of national caution has the vote ever been withheld from immigrants until they have learned our language, earned a certificate of fitness from our schools, or given definite evidence of loyalty to our country. When such questions have been raised, political leaders have replied, "What? Tax men and in return give them no vote? Compel men to obey the authority of a government to which they have no consent? Never. That is un-American." So it happens that men of all nations and in all races, except the Mongolian, may secure citizenship and automatically become voters in any state in the Union. And even the Mongolian born in this country is a citizen and has the vote. With such a history behind it, how can our nation escape the logic it has never failed to follow when its last unfranchised class calls for the vote? Behold our Uncle Sam floating the banner with one hand, "Taxation without representation is tyranny," and with the other, seizing the billions of dollars paid in taxes by women to whom he refuses representation. Behold him again, welcoming the boys of 21 and newly made immigrant citizens to a voice in their own government, while he denies the fundamental right of democracy to thousands of women public school teachers from whom many of these men learned all they know about citizenship and patriotism. Women college professors, women who preach in our pulpits, interpret the law in our courts, preside over our hospitals, write books and magazines, and serve in every uplifting moral and social enterprise. Is there a single man who can justify such inequality of treatment, such outrageous discrimination? Not one. Women's suffrage became an assured fact when the Declaration of Independence was written. It matters not at all whether Thomas Jefferson and his compatriots thought of women when they wrote that immortal document. They conceived and voiced a principle greater than any man, a power not of themselves, which makes for righteousness, gave them the vision, and they proclaimed truism as immutable as the multiplication table, as changeless as time. These are new times, and as an earnest of its sincerity in the battle of democracy, the government of Great Britain has not only pledged votes to its disfranchised men and to its women, but the measure passed the House of Commons in June 1917 by a vote of 7-1, and will be sent to the House of Lords in December with the assurance of Premier Lloyd George that it will shortly become a national law. The measure will be applied to England, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, and all the smaller British islands. Canada, too, has enfranchised women of all its provinces, starting with the Pacific Coast to northern New York, predicted votes for all Canadian women before the next national election. Russia, whose opposing forces have made a sad farce of the new poverty, is nevertheless pledged to a democracy which shall include women. It must be remembered that no people ever pass from an absolute autocracy into a smoothly running democracy with ready-made constitution and a full set of statutes to cover all conditions. Russia is no exception. Great Britain, not the United States, is now leading the world in the coming democracy. The present bill provides that the parliamentary note shall be extended to women. All other suffrage rights on equal terms with men have long been enjoyed by women of England, Scotland, Ireland, and Wales. The women of Canada have had multiple suffrage for many years, and the qualifications vary in different provinces, and the women of Australia and New Zealand have had long suffrage in equal terms of men. The Scandinavian countries, too, have outstripped us in applied democracy and have taken the second lead. Universal suffrage, including women, is already established in Finland, Norway, Denmark, and Iceland, and even Sweden long ago gave women equal rights with men, except the vote in Parliament. Is it not clear that the world expects such action and fails to understand its delay? In the face of these facts, we ask you, senators and the members of the House of Representatives of the United States, is it not the immediate enfranchisement of women of our nation the duty of the hour? Why hesitate?